She drew every plant in that glasshouse with her own hand, in her own time, in the years after her father died and her aunt made her life a study in quiet degradation. She gave 4 years of her mind and her grief and her genius to a body of work that a man with connections and no conscience put his name on. And the world believed him, because the world always believes the man with connections. What nobody knew, what even she had half forgotten, was the small crescent moon she pressed into the corner of every illustration she had ever made, since the age of 9, since her father taught her that a woman who does not mark her work will one day find it belonging to someone else. He was right, and he was also, it turned out, the reason she won. The question this story asks is not whether she could prove it. It is what it costs a woman to be believed, and what it looks like when a man who has been watching her pay that cost decides he has seen enough. "You draw very prettily," said Lady Harwick, setting Marin's illustration down on the breakfast table with the particular care one uses for objects of no value. For someone with no formal training. Of course a trained eye would notice the deficiencies immediately. Mr. Crane noticed them at once. He said as much when he was kind enough to review your father's papers. He said the illustrations showed a certain native facility, but lacked the rigor one expects of serious scientific work. She picked up her teacup. "I thought you ought to know, since you seem to set such a store by them. It is kinder to hear it from my family." Marin looked at the illustration on the table. It was a Salic specimen, her finest piece, 18 months of observation compressed into a single page, every vein and catkin placed with a precision that had taken her 4 attempts and 3 winters of early mornings in the cold glasshouse to achieve. She had been rather proud of it. She picked it up. She folded it once along the center. She placed it in her pocket. "Thank you, Aunt," she said. "Will there be anything else?" There was always something else. Lady Harwick had the gift, rare and awful, of cruelty that presented itself as concern. The kind that left no bruise you could point to, no word you could cite in your own defense, only a slow accumulation of small diminishments that added up, over 3 years, to something that looked very much like erasure. Since Marin's father had died and left her to this woman's guardianship. A guardianship that would expire on her 25th birthday, which was now 41 days away. Lady Harwick had applied herself to the project of Marin's reduction with a consistency that Marin could only describe privately as impressive. She had told Marin her drawings were pretty but unserious. She had told her that her father's botanical work, which Marin had spent 4 years completing and extending, was the kind of amateur effort that embarrassed families of standing when circulated publicly. She had read Marin's letters before they were sent. Marin had discovered this by accident, finding one unsealed on the hall table, the wax broken and reset with slightly the wrong pressure. She had told the village that Marin was delicate, prone to fancy, that her father's death had affected her nerves. She had done all of this with perfect smiling consistency, in the tone of someone performing a charitable duty, and she had done it because Marin's father had left the glasshouse and its contents, the specimens, the journals, for years of documented research, to Marin directly, and Lady Harwick's son stood to inherit everything else. And the everything else was considerably more impressive if it included the work done in that glasshouse. She had given the research journals to Mr. Crane in March of 1812. Marin had been in the village when it happened. She came home to find the journals gone, and her aunt arranging flowers in the parlor with the serene expression of a woman who has concluded a satisfying piece of business. "Mr. Crane called," Lady Harwick said without turning. "I gave him your father's papers to review. He is a fellow of the Royal Society, you know. He will know what is worth preserving." Marin stood in the doorway of the parlor for a long time. The smell of the room, hothouse roses, her aunt's particular soap, the beeswax of furniture polished by servants who were not paid enough, felt like something she could not breathe through. Then she went to the glasshouse. She sat on the cold flagstone floor. She pressed her palms flat against the stone, real, cold, permanent, and she thought 2 things in sequence. First, he has the journals, but he does not have the illustrations. Second, 41 days. She could count. She had always been good at counting. The lending library on Morrow Street was open on wet Tuesdays, which was when Marin went, because wet Tuesdays were when Lady Harwick visited her sister, and the carriage was available, and the house breathed differently in her absence. Looser, quieter, like a room with the windows opened. The library smelled of old paper and lamp oil, and the particular dusty warmth of books that have been read by many hands. Marin came here to use the reading table by the east window, which had the best light, and to be alone among people who were also alone and did not require conversation. She was copying a passage from a volume of botanical taxonomy when the bell above the door sounded, and the quality of the room changed. She had heard people describe this sensation before. The stilling that occurs when someone walks in whom the room recognizes as significant. She had always assumed it was a romantic exaggeration. It was not. The Duke of Roe walked into the lending library on a wet Tuesday morning, and the two other patrons looked up simultaneously, as if pulled by a string, and the librarian straightened his cuffs. He was not what she expected. She had heard of him. Everyone had heard of him, the disgrace 5 years ago, the liability judgment, the fact that he had paid without explanation and retreated to his estate and emerged occasionally into society with the expression of a man who has made a private decision about the cost of other people's opinions. She had expected a cold. What she saw was something more complex. A man who had learned to take up exactly as much space as he required and not 1 inch more, which in a room this size was still considerable. He looked at the room. His gaze moved, cataloging unhurried, and stopped when it reached her. She looked back. She had stopped apologizing for looking directly at people. He was, she noted with the precision of someone trained to record what she observed, surprised. Not by her presence. By something about her specifically. His expression did not change. She doubted it changed often. But something behind it shifted, the way light shifts behind glass when a cloud moves. He looked away first. She recorded this fact and returned to her taxonomy. He chose the reading table adjacent to hers. Of the 7 available tables, this was the one closest to her, which she noted and did not remark on. He requested 2 volumes from the librarian, both botanical, she noticed, which was unexpected, and opened the first without preamble. For 40 minutes they read in silence, which was the most comfortable silence Marin had experienced in 3 years. He did not attempt conversation. He did not look at her again, or if he did, he was extremely practiced at not being caught. He simply read, with the focused attention of someone for whom reading was not performance but necessity. When she rose to leave, she knocked her volume of taxonomy from the table. Purely by accident, genuinely, she was not the kind of woman who knocked things over for effect, and he caught it before it reached the floor. He held it out to her. Their hands were very close for a moment that was several seconds longer than retrieval required. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said. "You are Dr. Bell's daughter," he said. It was not a question. "I am. I read his monograph on riverine plant variants. 3 years ago." He paused. The illustrations were extraordinary. Something moved in her chest. She kept it from her face. "They were," she said. "Good day, Your Grace." She walked out into the rain. She did not run. She did not look back. But she counted on the walk home the number of people who had ever spoken of her father's illustrations as extraordinary. It was a short count. It was now one longer. He came to Harwick House 4 days later, ostensibly to return a monograph he had borrowed from her father's collection through the local lending network. This was a transparent pretext. The monograph could have been returned through the library, and they both knew it and neither of them said so. Lady Harwick received him in the parlor with a warmth that Marin recognized as the warmth reserved for titles. "Your Grace, how delightful. I was not aware you had an interest in botany." "I have an interest in good work," he said. He looked at Marin across the room. "Miss Bell, I wonder if you might show me the glasshouse. I understand the collection is significant." Lady Harwick's smile did not waver. But her eyes went to Marin with a particular flatness that Marin knew well. The look that said, "You have done something I will address later," and said pleasantly, "Of course. Though I must warn you, Your Grace, the collection is somewhat disordered since my dear brother-in-law's passing. Marin has not always had the capacity to maintain it properly. I would like to see it regardless," he said. In the glass house, among the fogged glass and the green smell of winter earth and the salix specimens growing up the south-facing wall, he was a different person. Or rather, he was more of the same person, the careful attention turned outward onto the plants with the same focused quality she had observed in the library. He asked 3 questions, each one more precise than the last, each one demonstrating a familiarity with botanical science that she had not anticipated. "You know this subject," she said. "My mother was a botanist. Amateur but serious." He was looking at a pressed specimen she had mounted last autumn. "She taught me to read an illustration, to distinguish observation from decoration." He looked at her. "These are observations. Every line." Marin looked at the specimen. In the lower left corner, so small it was nearly invisible, was a crescent moon. a habit she had had since she was 9 years old. Her father's mark was a star. Hers was the moon because she had decided at 9 that the moon was the better object. It changed, it endured, it was present even in daylight if you knew where to look. My father taught me that a woman who does not mark her work, she said, will one day find it belonging to someone else. He was very still. Was he right? She looked at him for a long moment. Come back on Thursday, she said. I will show you something. She had not planned to say it. She had not planned to tell anyone. But he had said an observation, and he had said it was extraordinary, and she was 41 days from her birthday, reduced to 37 now, and she was tired, not broken, never broken, but tired, of carrying it alone. He came back on Thursday. She showed him the print. It was a decorative botanical print, the kind sold in London print shops for drawing room display. 50 copies, produced in the autumn of 1810 by a printer on Vine Street, who accepted commissions from anonymous contributors at 4 shillings apiece. She had been 18. She had needed 4 shillings, and she had had the drawing already, and her father had encouraged her, half joking, half serious. Put your mark on it, my love. Always put your mark on it. In the lower left corner of the print, a crescent moon. Pressed into the copper plate by her own hand, the size of a thumbnail, easily overlooked. She placed it beside the illustration in the published paper. Mr. Crane's paper, the Journal of Natural Philosophy, Volume 22, which had arrived at Harwick House 6 months ago under Crane's name, with her drawing inside it, her crescent moon inside it, because he had not known what it was. He had thought it a printing mark. He had left it in. The shop ledger, she said, records the commission. Autumn 1810. A young lady of Shropshire. 4 shillings. She set the ledger page, a copy, obtained at some trouble, beside the prints. The paper was published in 1812. My drawing was in print shops 2 years before Mr. Crane claims to have made it. He looked at the 2 images. He looked at the crescent moon in each. He looked at her. He left your mark in the published paper, he said. He did not know it was a mark. The silence between them was the color of the fogged glass, dense, alive, pressing. How long have you had this? He said. The ledger copy? 3 months. I wrote to the printer in September. Alone. It was my work, she said. It was always going to have to be me. He looked at her for a long time. She held his gaze, because she had stopped being the first to look away from people who doubted her. Only he was not doubting her. He was doing something she had less practice receiving. He was seeing her. Fully. Without reduction. The way she looked at specimens, recording what was actually there, not what was expected. I sit on the board of the Journal of Natural Philosophy, he said quietly. I have done for 2 years. She had not known this. Then you can call an emergency session. Yes. He paused. I should have told you at once. I did not know when we met in the library that, he stopped. Began again. I knew Crane's paper had been questioned by one of our scientific reviewers. I came to Shropshire to investigate quietly. I did not know the author was. Another stop. Was someone you had already met? She said. Was someone I was? He looked away. I looked back. His voice, when it came, was lower. Were you? The word landed in the room and stayed there. Outside the glass house, the November wind moved through the bare garden. Inside, the smell of earth and cold green and something warmer that had not been there before. She should have said something practical. She had a list of practical things to say. About the board session, about the solicitor, about the 41 days, now 37, remaining in this house. She said none of them. You looked away first, she said. In the library. He blinked. I beg your pardon? When I looked at you. You looked away first. She was not entirely sure why she had said it. Only that it was true, and she had been thinking about it, and she had long since stopped editing herself for the comfort of rooms that would diminish her regardless. Something shifted in his face. Not softening. Something more interesting than softening. A man who has kept himself very contained for a very long time arriving, by surprise, at the edge of that containment. Yes, he said. I did. Why? A pause that lasted long enough to be an answer in itself. Because I was not certain, he said carefully, that if I did not, I would be able to look away at all. The glass house was very quiet. Thursday next, she said eventually. Bring Harrington. He is a solicitor. I have checked. I know he is. Good. She picked up the print. She held it out to him. Take this. Keep it safe. It is the only copy I trust outside this room. He took it. His fingers were careful with it. The way she was careful with specimens, the particular attention of someone who understands the value of what they are holding. He was almost at the door when she said, without planning to, "Your Grace." He turned. "The liability judgment," she said. 5 years ago. I do not believe you did it." The stillness that came over him was unlike anything she had seen on a human face. Not surprise, not relief, something older than both. Something that had been waiting quietly in a room with no windows for a very long time. "No one has said that to me," he said. "In 5 years." "I know," she said. "It is evident in the way you hold yourself in rooms." She met his eyes. "You should not have had to carry it alone either." He left without another word. But at the door of the glass house he paused, his hand on the frame, his back to her, and she saw him breathe. One long, slow breath, the kind that releases something. Then he was gone. She stood among her plants in the cold light and felt, for the first time in 3 years, that the ground beneath her was not shifting. The second attack came on a Monday. Lady Harwick had written to the journal. Not to the editor, to the board of patrons directly, 3 of whom she knew socially. Her letter was a masterpiece of its kind. It expressed, with great delicacy, a concern that her niece, a young woman of sadly disordered nerves following her father's death, had developed an unhealthy fixation on Mr. Crane's published work, and that the family feared she might make approaches to the journal that would cause embarrassment to all concerned. She enclosed, as evidence of Marin's instability, a letter Marin had written to a scientific reviewer 2 years ago. The letter she had now confirmed had been intercepted, copied, and resealed. The journal's secretary wrote to Rowe. Rowe came to Harwick House that same afternoon. He found Marin in the glasshouse. She was repotting a specimen, her hands in the dark soil, her face composed. She had seen her aunt's face at breakfast that morning, the particular satisfaction on it, and she had known something had been done. She had come to the glasshouse because it was the only room in this house that had ever been fully hers, and she had put her hands in the earth because it was real and cold, and it did not diminish her, and she needed, very badly, something that did not diminish her. He told her about the letter. All of it. He did not soften it. She listened. She did not stop repotting. When he finished, she pressed the soil firm around the root ball with both thumbs, an even, deliberate pressure, and set the pot on the shelf. She wiped her hands on her apron. She turned to face him. "She has been reading my letters for 3 years, Marin said. I have known for 14 months. I have not confronted her because confrontation without proof is merely accusation, and a woman in my position cannot afford to make accusations she cannot win." She looked at him steadily. She did not know about the print shop ledger. She does not know about the crescent moon. She has been fighting a version of me that is smaller than I am. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, the November wind. Inside, the smell of fresh earth and cold glass. "Marin," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. He seemed to realize it at the same moment she did. Something moved across his face. A man stepping deliberately over a line he has been standing at for some time. "James," she said quietly. Equally deliberate. Equally clear. The air between them was very compressed. "I want to call the board session for Friday," he said. His voice was low and careful, the voice of someone managing something large. "Crane will be summoned. The prints will be presented. The ledger. Every patron will be present." He paused. "It will be public. It will be permanent. And it will be, without question, the end of him." "I know. Your aunt will know by Saturday." "Good," she said. "Then Friday." He took a step toward her. She did not step back. He was close enough now that she could see the careful control in his face. The contained man at the absolute edge of his containment, holding barely, because the moment was not yet arrived. "When this is finished," he said very quietly, "I intend to say something to you that I cannot say now, because it would not be proper, while you are still in this house, under these circumstances, without your full freedom." She looked up at him. "You intend to make me wait. I intend to do this correctly." "How very restrained of you," she said, and something in her voice was not quite composure, not quite amusement, but something that lived between the two and was considerably more dangerous than either. His jaw tightened. "You are not making this easy." "No," she agreed. "I am not." The glass house was absolutely silent. "Friday," he said. "Friday," she confirmed. He left. She turned back to her plants. She was smiling, privately barely, the kind of smile that belongs only to a woman who knows exactly what she is doing and has chosen, with complete deliberateness, to do it. She went to Crane's house on Thursday night. Not for the manuscript. She had accepted that the manuscript was gone, rewritten in his hand, absorbed into his published work, unrecoverable in any form that would serve her now. She went for one thing only: the original commission letter from the print shop. She had written to them in September, but the printer had mentioned, in his reply, that he kept a copy of all original correspondence in a locked box by date. She needed the letter itself, the one she had sent in 1810, in her own handwriting, at age 18, describing the illustration and requesting the commission. Because it predated everything and it was in her hand, and it was in Crane's house because he had been thorough enough to collect every piece of paper that might connect her to the work. She had worked this out over 3 months. She had been waiting for the right night. The house was dark by 11. The study window faced the garden. The latch was the old style. She had noted this when she attended a dinner here in September, and excused herself to find the retiring room and taken a slightly longer route than necessary. She had been raised by a man who taught her to observe everything and record it accurately, and she had been observing and recording for 32 days. The window yielded. The study was dark and cold and smelled of tobacco and old paper. She did not use a candle. She used the moonlight, November moonlight, thin but sufficient, and she found the locked box behind the 3rd volume from the left on the bottom shelf, because it made a different sound when she ran her finger along the shelf edge, a hollow sound, the sound of something that was not a book. The lock was a simple brass mechanism. Her father had shown her how these worked. He had a particular fondness for locks and mechanisms of all kinds, and had considered them an appropriate subject for his daughter's education. She was inside the box in 4 minutes. The letter was there. October 1810. Her handwriting, the particular forward-leaning hand she had used at 18 before her tutor corrected it, which made it even more distinctly hers. Describing the Salix illustration. Requesting the commission. Signed with her initials and in the bottom corner, her habit. A small crescent moon, drawn in ink, because she had always marked everything. She took it. She relocked the box. She replaced it. She went out the way she had come in and walked home through the cold moonlit dark, the letter inside her coat, her heartbeat entirely steady. She had been afraid once of many things. She was not afraid of this. The board session was held on a Friday morning in the journal's offices in London, which Rowe had arranged with a speed and completeness that required 6 letters in 3 days and the kind of quiet authority that does not need to raise its voice. The room smelled of old leather and the printing press 3 floors below, a rhythmic thud constant as a pulse that continued throughout everything that followed. Crane was present. He had been told only that there was a question of attribution. He arrived with the expression of a man who is prepared for a minor inconvenience. 7 board members. The editor, Dr. Fielding, the scientific reviewer who had first raised the question, and Marin at the far end of the table, in her second-best dress, her hands folded, her face as composed as she had ever held it. Rowe sat at the head of the table. He looked at Crane once, a single level look, the kind of look that does not require additional expression. And then he looked at Marin, and his face did something private and quick that only she was close enough to see. Something that said, "I am here. This is yours. Take it." She spread the evidence on the table. The decorative print from 1810. The crescent moon in the lower left corner, the size of a thumbnail. The illustration in Crane's published paper. The crescent moon in the lower left corner, identical. The shop ledger page. October 1810. A young lady of Shropshire. 4 shillings. The commission letter, in her 18-year-old handwriting, describing the Salix illustration, signed with her initials and her moon. She said, in the clearest voice she had ever used, "I am the author of every illustration in Mr. Crane's paper. I can be shown to have produced the principal illustration 2 years before the paper's publication date. The mark in the lower left corner of each illustration is my personal mark, used since the age of 9. It appears in the published paper because Mr. Crane did not know what it was. I have the original commission letter, the shop ledger, and 50 decorative prints in circulation that predate his publication. I am prepared to provide all of these to any examining committee the board sees fit to appoint." She stopped. She waited. Crane said, "This is outrageous." "Mr. Crane," said Dr. Fielding, not looking up from the print he was examining, "can you tell me what this mark is?" He pointed to the crescent moon. A pause. "A printing artifact," Crane said. "An irregularity in the plate. It appears in every illustration in the paper," Fielding said. "Identically placed. Identical size." He set the print beside the journal illustration. The two moons sat next to each other on the table like a sentence that had already finished itself. And it appears in a print shop commission from 1810. He looked at Crane. 2 years before you claim to have drawn this. Crane said nothing. There was nothing to say. The table had said it. Rowe did not speak. He did not need to. He placed his hand flat on the table, palm down, quiet, final, and looked at the editor, and the editor looked at the evidence, and the matter was concluded in the way that matters are concluded when the evidence is absolute and the room knows it. A correction will be published, the editor said. Full attribution. Miss Bell's name, in its entirety, as sole illustrator and contributing author. He looked at Marin. I owe you an apology on behalf of this institution. You wrote to us. We did not reply. No, she said. You did not. She did not say anything further. She did not need to. Afterward, in the corridor above the press, the smell of hot metal and ink rising through the floorboards, the rhythmic thud of the machines below printing the next issue of the journal that would soon carry her name, Rowe fell into step beside her. They walked in silence for a moment. Around them the building was busy, editors and clerks and compositors moving with the particular purpose of people who work in the company of language. And in the middle of all of it the two of them walked together, and the space between them was approximately 6 inches, which was not the space of mere acquaintance. You went to his house, he said. Thursday night. Yes. Alone. I have been alone for 3 years, she said. I am very good at it. He stopped walking. She stopped too. They were in an alcove off the main corridor, a narrow space with a window overlooking the street, gray London sky, the smell of rain coming, a cart moving below with a sound like distant thunder. He turned to face her. I said, he began, and then stopped, because he was a man who chose his words with the care of someone who has learned what careless words cost, and he was choosing these with more care than usual. You said, she said, that you intended to say something when I was free. Yes. My 25th birthday is in 33 days. I know. I will be entirely my own person in 33 days. My father's request was released. My aunt's guardianship ends. I will have the glass house and the collection and the income and... She paused, and when she continued her voice was not quite even, which was the only concession she allowed herself. And nothing else I have not made myself. He looked at her. The contained man. The careful man. The man who had paid a judgment he did not owe to protect someone he loved and said nothing about it for 5 years, and had clearly decided, somewhere in the last 3 weeks, that certain kinds of silence were no longer bearable. 33 days, he said. Yes. I can wait 33 days. I know you can. She looked up at him. Can you wait 33 days without looking away first? Something broke open in his face. Not undignified, not desperate, but real, entirely real. The face of a man who has been carefully constructed for a very long time and has encountered, in this woman, the one thing he had not constructed a defense against. No, he said. I find that I cannot. He took her hand. Both of them were still, in the narrow corridor above the press, the smell of ink and rain, the sound of the machines below printing the world's next version of itself. His hand around hers was warm and certain and entirely deliberate. Marin, he said, when this is done, when you are free, I would very much like to. Yes, she said. He blinked. I have not finished. You did not need to. She looked at him with the directness she had never once apologized for. I have been watching you for 3 weeks, James. I know what you were going to say. And the answer is yes. The press thudded below. London moved outside the window. In the alcove, a man who had been alone for 5 years and a woman who had been alone for 3 held onto each other in the middle of the day in a building full of people, and did not let go. 1 year later, the crescent moon appeared in print for the 3rd time in a spring issue of the Journal of Natural Philosophy, above an article on riverine plant variants, extending and completing the work her father had begun and she had finished, carrying the byline Miss M. Bell in full, which the editor had insisted upon and which she had allowed because it was accurate and she had always cared, above everything, about accuracy. She was in the glass house when the issue arrived. Her own glass house now at Rowe Park, built to her specification against the south-facing wall, glass to the east for the morning light, flagstone floors, a pressing bench at the height she required. The smell of earth and winter becoming spring and something warmer underneath. Wood smoke from the house, the particular domestic warmth of a place that was hers in every sense that mattered. He came in without knocking, which he had stopped doing 3 months ago, because she had told him that people who knocked on the doors of rooms they were welcome and did so out of uncertainty, and she did not want him to be uncertain. He was carrying the journal and a cup of tea he had made himself, because he had discovered in the past year that he liked making things, small domestic things, for her specifically. He set the tea down. He set the journal beside it, open to her page. She looked at her name, then at the crescent moon in the corner of her illustration. She thought of her father, who had taught her to mark her work. She thought of the morning she had pressed her palms against the cold floor of her aunt's glasshouse and counted 41 days and decided she would not collapse. She thought of a wet Tuesday in a lending library and a man who had said extraordinary as though he meant it and had looked away first and had come back anyway. She thought of Lady Harwick, who had received the journal's formal letter of correction in January, in the presence of the local charitable committee, and who had left the county by February, for her sister's house in Bath, reportedly, for reasons of health, which was the story, and everyone knew it was the story, and no one said so, which was its own kind of justice. Maren picked up her tea. She looked out through the east-facing glass at the morning garden. "Well," he said. He was watching her face the way he always watched her face, with the full attention of a man who has decided that this particular face is worth every bit of careful observation he can give it. She turned to him. She let him see, fully, without the careful management she had applied to her expressions for 3 years in a house that did not deserve her honesty, what it felt like to be here, in this room, with her name in print, with him. "It is exactly right," she said. He crossed the glasshouse in 4 steps and kissed her in the morning light, among the plants she had named and the work she had proven, and the life she had built from nothing but precision and patience, and the absolute refusal to let anyone tell her what she was worth. Outside, the spring was beginning. The salix on the south wall was putting out new growth, pale green, tender, reaching toward the glass. Her father had been right about everything. The moment that cost Maren the most in this story was not the boardroom. It was not the night she went alone through a dark window to take back what was hers. It was breakfast. An ordinary morning. Her aunt setting down her finest illustration with the careful hands one uses for worthless things, and Maren folding it, once along the center, and putting it in her pocket and saying thank you, Aunt, because she had learned that the most powerful thing she could do in that house was give nothing away. That is the moment. That is what she chose every morning for 3 years, between her dignity and her survival. And she chose both, and she never stopped choosing both. Tell me in the comments. When did you know she was going to win? Because I think the answer is different for everyone. And I think it tells you something about what kind of proof you require before you believe a woman who says this is mine.